One of the first things that I like to do is to have you tell us how you became involved in the Feminist Art Program, why you had chosen to study at Fresno, and what you were doing before joining the program. And then in your case, Judith, how you came to make the documentary about the program. So we'll start with you.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes. Well, I was living in Fresno. My mother had been born in Fresno, and even though I was there, I was at Fresno State. I kept changing my major. I didn't know really what I wanted to do, but when I heard about Judy's class, it really intrigued me. And so, getting into that class, I think for me, a true life-changing event. I have no idea what I would have done otherwise, because I think you saw I was the one in the overalls or the red face. I couldn't even say the words cock or cunt. I mean, I had trouble doing the male part. I didn't want to do it, but I think I see now, watching it today, I saw this wonderful camaraderie that we had that it brought back a lot of memories. And also, Judy insisted that we look each other in the eyes, we shake hands, we say our full name first and last, because I started college in 1966, where in a classroom, if there were men in the class, they did all the talking, the women kind of receded back. And there was a saying that women went to college to get an MRS degree, and once you got that, you just became a homemaker. But I knew I didn't want to do that, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. So meeting Judy, and I have to say, I've never had met anyone like her, and I still haven't, 50-some years later. She's truly one of a kind, but I always have had this feeling she saw something in me that I couldn't even see in myself, and she helped bring that out, and I think I'm truly grateful for that. So.
Thank you. Karen?
Well, I was already going to Fresno State. Is this on?
Yes.
I was an art major. I thought I was totally accepted in the art world at Fresno State. I knew all my professors. In fact, most of them I was going out with. And I thought I was the art star at Fresno State. So when Judy put up this poster in the hallway that said, "Women who want to become artists, join this program," I decided, well, no, that's not for me because I'm already an artist. And so I didn't join until halfway through the semester. And I joined because I happened to be going out with Judy Chicago's studio assistant, and he kept telling me all the stuff the women were doing, and I started to feel like I was going to be left out, and if I didn't join, I would miss this entirely different experience. But I was really afraid that I would lose my, quote, what I thought my status in the art department, because all the male teachers were making fun of the Feminist Art Program, and so I would stand there and make fun of him with the male art professors. But then once I got in, I realized it was a really valuable experience, and it caused me to question a lot of the things I thought about myself and my art before that.
Thank you. Dory?
Hi. Well, when I saw the poster that Judy put up, one of the things, I went to the first meeting, and she had said that we were going to take a car apart and put it back together. And I thought that sounded really interesting, and I have a lot of family that take cars apart and put it back together. But we never did that. I don't know, it never happened.
I was going to say, I don't ever remember hearing about taking a car apart and putting it back together.
It never happened. But anyway, Chris Rush, who isn't here, was a friend of mine, and she said, just tell them about all your sexual experiences to get in. Well, I was very young and really didn't have anything, so I just made up some stuff. And so I guess it worked. I got in.
What brought you to Fresno?
Oh, my family has had a trailer park in the lower Sierras. And so, Fresno was the closest school. And I didn't have a lot of money at that point. My parents had anyway, it's a long story, but I won't go into it.
It seems like you were all at the right place at the right time.
Yeah, so it happened, and I don't know if I have a pretty loud voice. Usually people can hear me, even if I don't want them to. It was really, we had a studio off campus.
Yes.
And we paid, I think it was $25 a month each. And Sherry, who you saw, the blonde in the...
Sherry on the toilet.
Sherry on the toilet. She had an apartment above, so she paid part of the rent. So it was it had been a porno theater at one time. But it was a big space. So one of the things that we did was we turned that space into a studio. I put a dark room in. I had never done that. Did the electrical, everything, So we all learned how to make a space for us. And that was one of the first lessons we had from Judy, which I don't know if you knew that or not. But yeah, so.
Yes, we built a 40-foot wall. She taught us how to carry sheetrock, how to use hammer and nails, insisted we all buy work boots.
Yeah, we had a uniform.
A lot of us went barefoot then. Do you remember that?
Well, I didn't.
I did.
But we got work boots, and we wore heavy dungarees and stuff, jeans, and that was it. Anyway, that's.
So, Judith, how did you come about to make this film? Because you were at UCLA at the time, correct?
Right. I had just received a BA in film from UCLA, and I'd had a few jobs. I worked as assistant director on a film by Marcel Ophuls, who went on to do The Sorrow and the Pity. So that was very inspiring. But then I had a part-time job in the spring reading women's liberation literature. And I have to say, at this time in my life, I became very swept up. I became quite radical in my feelings about women's liberation. And in reading this was for a professor who wanted to put together an anthology, like Sisterhood is Powerful. A lot of anthologies were coming out, and she must have given me 100 articles. And out of those articles, which was a very consciousness-raising experience to just sit there and do all this reading, but I found Judy's article and another article to be the best, and I felt, I really want to make a film about this. I want to go back and get an MFA and make a film about this. And I knew Judy was a natural for me because I knew a lot of people who knew her since I was in high school. I knew people taking her class at Continuing Ed when she was Judy Garowitz. And so somebody turned me on. I went to her opening in Pasadena. I can't quite remember the name of that show, but that's for those Pasadena pieces. And she told me about the program that she was just beginning. And the other thing I think that motivated me, I had studied cinema verite at UCLA, and I really loved that idea. And I knew that the program, then I went up and I visited the program, and I knew that it would be the perfect place to do that kind of filmmaking, which we did with 16 millimeter eclairs. I would say the other thing that was really helped me make that film was my advisor at UCLA, Ed Brokaw, who started the UCLA Film School. And he asked me, who are you going to have? He thought the idea was great. He knew who Judy was. He thought the idea was great. He said, who's going to shoot the film? And I mentioned the names of a few guys, and he said, absolutely not. You cannot take men into that situation. And so I said, well, there were just a few women in the film department then. And I said, well, who's going to do it? I don't know if any of them know how to do it. And he said, it doesn't matter. Just take the cameras up. They'll learn. Just do it. And that's what happened.
I mean, how amazing to have the experimental program going on, and then also you with an all-woman crew there, like everyone figuring out, which I guess you became a subject in the film too, especially with...
Well, that was part of the idea of cinema verite, that you wanted to make very clear your subjectivity. You wanted to, because it was not possible in a film to pretend to be objective. You had to put yourself, that was part of or what I was picked up on about cinema verite.
So how did you put yourself in the position of holding Larry Bell's gun, pointing it at Judy Chicago?
Well, no, that was Judy's thing. This was all Judy's thing. I mean, he had, of course, it was also, I have to say, her thing knowing the camera was running, right? Because that's something that filmmaking is always affected by people who know the camera's running. She above all. And so he had just happened to, he was a friend of hers. He had come down to visit her or visit the program. He came down with his guns. and so she just organized this spontaneous improv. And then my thing about shooting everything, that was the idea. You just shoot whatever's going on. When we went to the Fresno airport, I mean, nowadays nowadays the cameras are much more easy, of course. They're on your cell phone or whatever. But then it was just 10 minutes, things, and in a 16 millimeter camera. But nowadays you can't do that because you have to get permits to shoot at airports and all kinds of things. But so she just spontaneously organized that, and I was just into shooting whatever was happening.
It's just so amazing that that was done in the spring of 1971. Then in the fall of 1971, Chris Burden produces Shot at F Space Gallery down in Orange County. And to see that, I'm sure that there wasn't a lot of crossing between the parties at that point, but that there was this, his piece was more about, or alluded to the violence of Vietnam, whereas that the gun piece was much more about domestic violence, and a lot of violence actually, or violence came up within the works of the Feminist Art Program, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the imagery that was hard to witness, because obviously we saw someone have a very strong reaction to that performance on screen.
Well, one of the projects I did in that first year was I wrote a play. I called it the Rivalry Play. At REDCAT, it's a short little silent film, two women fighting, one's tearing the other's clothes off. Previous to Judy's class, I had done a lot of costume and makeup for the theater, and I learned how you can sew Velcro in all the seams so the actors can rip each other's clothes off. But we had talked a lot about, going deep inside ourselves to get imagery. Anyway, I think that it came from when I was in junior high. The junior high I went to was a very rough junior high in Fresno where there were always fights at noon, and especially the girl fights were always really popular. I mean, they were scary. They were so vicious. So I wanted to have something like that. So the performers, Jan and Chris, who were also in the class, they were so into it when they performed that they'd end up with bruises afterwards. And I remember we performed it 3 different times maybe. One time we went up to UC Berkeley. It was performed to a grad art seminar class, and there was just dead silence. Nobody knew how to react or what to say about it. I think maybe that's what you were asking, like things that we did that the audience did not know how to respond. Because they literally, beat each other up, and they were both laying play dead on the floor when it ended.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit more about it, like as we get into Woman House. But yes, there's a lot of, and maybe we can talk about the conscious raising.
I just want to say one more thing. There was a lot of use of blood and cow's blood. There was a slaughterhouse kind of nearby, and a lot of the women in the class would come back with buckets of blood and guts, and Faith Wilding did it was like a sacrificial bride sculpture where the insides were open, and she'd have to continually replace the cow guts because they'd start to go bad. And the blood, I personally couldn't stand the smell, but that was me.
I borrowed one of, someone told me that I was looking for something to mix chemicals for photography, and I needed, and there was someone said, oh, well, that one just has some old blood in it, so I dumped it out. And then I think it was Suzanne Lacey's, I think. And I had to go to the slaughterhouse and get.
Oh, to replace her blood.
Suzanne got angry at you that you dumped out the blood?
Pardon?
Suzanne got angry at you that you dumped out the blood?
Yes, she did. Took her cow's blood. Yeah, I had to replace it.
They never asked what we were doing with it at the slaughterhouse. That's what I love about the 70s. And the fact that everybody smoked, nobody cared.
I was smoking throughout the film.
Yes, and chewing gum.
I finally stopped.
Chewing gum, smoking.
Chewing gum and
bring back the 70s. No permits, no liability, nothing. Just.
When Judy obtained permission to start the program, she specifically wanted it off-site. And you already alluded that you had the theater and you built it. Could you talk a little bit about the experience of being completely off campus and making work separate from the art department, but also separate from the rest of the school? Did it feel how different did it feel from a traditional education from that time?
Well, it gave you permission to do just about anything, and you didn't feel the male gaze of criticism on your work. I still did. I built a room, and it was basically a big cunt room. You entered by pushing yourself through this 4 inches of foam, and then you're standing on this foam floor, and then you're looking up at this liquid watery motion on the ceiling. And I remember I made it abstract enough that when my professors from Fresno State, we had a big opening at the end of the program to show all our work, and I made it as abstract enough that they could think it was a pretty good piece of artwork without thinking it was a cunt, so I still felt it. I didn't get as outrageous as like like Suzanne's piece with the guts and Faith's piece with the guts and the bride, and yeah, I made it pretty abstract, but it did give you that sense that you could do just about anything outrageous and get away with it.
For me, I was a little younger, so I hadn't had a lot of the college. I was in my second year of college, I think. So I kind of missed having other people, just other exposures to other teachers. So I was mainly doing photography then. So I did have a mentor I would go and show him my work, and I would get my grade in photography, so I got that separate. Yeah. Richard Delaney.
Yeah,
And I liked him. You know, he was a good teacher for me. He wasn't, he didn't try and change me. He just, you know, he mainly talked about technical things with me, so.
I think it was the distance, though. Fresno State was on one end of Fresno, and then our studio was on Kings Canyon, which is directly on the opposite end. And
it's about 8 to 10 miles.
Yeah, it would take me either, if I took the bus, if I had the money, I'd take the bus, but if not, I would ride on my bicycle, and it took me at least like 45 minutes to get there on a bike. So you were really separate from the campus.
Isolated.
And I think that really made a difference.
Yes, having that space was crucial to what we did. Had we been on campus, none of the stuff we did would have been possible.
I just want to say something about the work boots and so forth, that this was a period of time when women never wore such clothing. And I remember I got myself a pair of work boots also because of this. And just the idea of wearing work boots and jeans, and it was so radical. It was I was shocked the first time I saw it. A very radical environment. And something that I was looking for at the time, so.
Yeah.
Feet were protected.
Yes, but yes, what Judith said about the work boots and the jeans, someone told me once that I was the first woman they ever saw wearing 501 jeans. It just wasn't done. It's kind of hard to imagine that now, but that's when a woman could not get a credit card in her own name. You could be fired for being pregnant, legally fired for being pregnant. Abortion was illegal completely. It was just a different, very different time, but everybody smoked.
I didn't either. I didn't.
Well, some of them didn't. I smoked enough for both of you.
I don't think Judy smoked.
No, Judy never smoked. She chewed a lot of gum.
Yeah.
We saw some of it in the video, and we saw a space called the wrap room that was a space covered with carpet tiles and pillows all over it, and you all met in there. And I just would like you to talk a little bit about that and the importance of that space within the context of the program.
Yes, you know, every time I talk about the wrap room nowadays, I have to say the word R-A-P. Then it meant to talk. It had nothing to do with music. But it was the most incredible room because, well, first of all, we had all these carpets, colorful carpet scraps we put down. We made a lot of pillows. And that was, for me, it was the first time I ever sat with a group of women and talked about all kinds of things. And Chris Rush was the young woman talking, who had the little blonde streaks in her hair, and she talked about, she thought everything was her own personal issue, but by being in that room, we realized this affected all of us, all of these things, and it was really and I think that's the point of consciousness raising, women getting together, especially back then, because you just didn't talk about a lot of stuff. And I always wondered, Judith really focused on me. I had that fur vest, and I'm laying there, and anyway.
I can't say why. I mean, I can't remember why I put that in. You look quite beautiful, but I can't remember. I just want to say one thing. I was telling Lucia about this on the phone. But my sense is that the women's movement on the East Coast originated out of writing, journalism, and people like Gloria Steinem and so forth. But the women's movement on the West Coast, it was from art. It was from the art. And after the program, the women's building started in Los Angeles and so forth. And I also recall, maybe some of you were there or somebody knows about this, that it was sometime after, maybe in the mid-70s or 74 or something like that, there was a huge meeting at somebody's house, like 100 women in Santa Monica area.
Miriam Shapiro's house?
well, no, it wasn't Miriam Shapiro, but she was living in LA then. And it was this huge meeting. And the purpose of the meeting was to divide into consciousness raising groups. That we would then, and that we had these rules for consciousness raising groups that had come from the East Coast. And then I was in a group with Miriam Shapiro, Sheila DeBretfield, other people. And we divided into these groups. It was so powerful as a, to sit around, but I don't know whose house that was at. I can't remember.
So Judith, would you say that the experience of you going up, you had mentioned to me previously that you went up like 3 or 4 times and visited and filmed on different occasions. Did you find that this, that seeing the group like changed your practice or changed what you were working on?
Well, it did not change my approach to filmmaking. That was very much what it was, but I mean, it was very life-changing, I would say. It was indeed life-changing to be with this group and to have my feelings about women's liberation and feminism and so forth so affirmed by being with this group, and particularly Judy, quite unique in her ability to articulate at such an early period of time that the first time I went up just to talk with her and see the program before I decided to shoot, she showed me the Cock Cunt play that she had written. I knew it had to be in the movie, and it was just amazing. And that period of time, it was so different. And so when I finally finished the film and showed it, we had to show it at this big auditorium, and the audience, mostly guys in the audience, and they were just, silence. Silence. 500 people just pin drop. And so I would say that very much affected me, that period of time, definitely.
One of the things that Judy did that I don't think it's come up yet is she brought a lot of her friends from UCLA that she had gone to school with, Doug Edge. I mean, we did something in his studio. I can't remember what we did that water piece in his studio. But also they came up, to visit. Miriam Shapiro came up.
John Baldessari came.
Yeah.
And he stuck his cowboy boot in Jan's sculpture.
I know, she still talks about that, yeah. So, but she really did expose us to the larger, she didn't keep us isolated, she really exposed us to other more established artists.
Which is crazy to think that you were just there for 1 year, because then in 1971, the program moves to CalArts, and she co-directs it with Miriam Shapiro. The 3 of you followed. Judy did CalArts. Nancy and Karen, you both attended the Feminist Art Program with Judy and Miriam. And Dory, you're in the Women's Design Program, which was led by Sheila DeBretfield. Can you talk about what made you decide to follow a professor instead of finishing your degree at Fresno?
Oh, I had to. There was no way I was going to go back to what I was before, whatever that was. No, I felt like I had to. I was so excited. Anyway, you want to?
I just thought it was a great opportunity to expand my horizons and become a famous artist.
I had family down in LA, so it wasn't a big thing, and I got my sister got me a summer job doing, kind of like maid service for Kenny Price. A really, like helping clean up his studio. Yeah. So it's, my sister she was friends with them, and so it worked out. I needed a job, so that worked out.
So what were some of the differences between the program at Fresno being off-site and then coming to Burbank before the new campus opened in Valencia?
I don't know that we ever met in Burbank. I remember before, because school was supposed to start, but the new building wasn't finished. It seems like we met in people's homes. And that's when we got the idea for Woman House, because it was Paula Harper who Judy insisted they hire. She was a feminist art historian. She said, why don't you just find an old abandoned house and fix it up and then have a show? And that's what we did, and that's how Woman House came about, and it was like a really major project.
You found a dilapidated 14-room
17-room
mansion on Mariposa Street in Hollywood, and
It was going to be demolished.
It was set to be torn down, and it was Vicki Hodgetts who, she went to the Hall of Records, got the owner's name, and the owner said, oh yeah, sure, you can use it. You know, there was no worry about liability. There were 52 broken windows. The banister things were all knocked out, and anyway.
There was also no plumbing.
Yeah,
so,
no indoor toilets
So
at
we
all.
had to go out in the yard. And,
The whole time, months, we were there for 4 months.
yeah.
And then I think Judy asked me to document it. I don't know, so I wasn't part of Woman House, but
She took
I
a
documented
ton
it,
of
yeah.
great photos. Dory has the best photos.
well, most of the photographs that we have from that time, Dory, are yours. So
Yeah.
grateful that you were documenting it. How do you see that documentation being part of your practice and like what you were doing at CalArts during that time?
Well, at that time, I was doing photography, but I'm kind of an observer. That's just my natural sense. Like, when I was in Fresno, I went to a school that was mainly all Native American, so I was kind of the other, and it just, I'm kind of sometimes the other. Not that I want to be,
So for Woman House, Judith, you said that you had come, that you actually filmed part of the documentation for it too, for the film Woman House.
Well, yes, after working on this, I don't know, Johanna Demetrakis approached me, or how exactly I did the sound on Woman House, and I also was an assistant editor on Woman House, and interviewed some of the people in the movie.
And how was that to see a second space of the students and to see how they
I just
progressed?
thought it was extraordinary, the artwork, the spaces that were done. I still remember them so clearly, each of the spaces. Quite extraordinary.
It was a magnificent house. It's a shame it was torn down. It's just magnificent. Built in 1900 with huge rooms and anyway.
Staircase was wonderful.
Yeah, big.
Yeah.
One,
It was
one,
well used.
one of the pieces that was installed in Woman House was Leia's room. Karen and Nancy, you collaborated on that. Can you talk about how you decided to come up with the piece and what it took to execute it?
Okay, well, we had been reading books by women. Judy insisted we read them, but they were wonderful books, and Karen and I both really responded to writing by Colette, and Leia was one of the characters. She was a courtesan, she was aging, and it was the book, The Last of Cherie, it was called, that she had, and her bedroom, the way it was described, it was like watermelon pink and very lush, and so Karen and I worked together. We put up wallpaper. Oh, you have to tell about borrowing the antiques, because
Well, we went to Melrose because we told that was the antique capital of LA, and we were dressed in our usual workbook hippie garb, and we'd approach these antique dealers and try to explain what we were doing, and most of the time it was like, oh God, get these women out of here. But we found two dealers that were really good to us, and they loaned us a beautiful canopy bed and a gorgeous dressing table. And let's see, we had your carpet and a beautiful chaise lounge.
yeah, I had an antique chaise lounge.
It was fabulous. And about halfway through the construction of it, I thought the room would need an occupant, and that would have to be Leah herself. And so I decided I would do a performance piece every night that the house was being shown, where I showed the pain of aging. And I was 20. I was 21, not a wrinkle on my face, but I was also very depressed by that time, and so I really did show a lot of pain in the work. Sometimes I would be reduced to tears just sitting in front of the mirror, confronting my own vanity and my own fears of aging, and it was a really powerful piece. I didn't like doing it, but yeah.
Yes. Layers and layers.
Layers and layers of makeup. And I've recreated it 5 times now. Once in Not Igby Gallery and once in Berlin for Women House 2022 and once in Fresno State and another time.
Oh, at CalArts.
And I still wear the outfit. It was this old antique camisole and bathrobe. It's pretty much falling apart by now because it was an antique when I had it 50 years ago. So it's really an antique now.
I think that I can easily say we're all jealous that you're wearing the same outfit that you wore in the 1970s.
It's
that you
tighter
still fit
now.
into it.
Yes.
How performance is interesting when you think about when it was made, the body that you had during that time, and the body that you're in now. How do you feel the piece was received by a public in recent years, and how did it feel performing that? Because you were so young the first time, and then
And I'm not
and not
anymore.
so much the other times.
I can definitely relate to it more now. Yeah, because Leah in the book was 45 and I'm 74. So, I mean, I've way gone past what Leah was when she was aging. But I don't know, relating to my body, it's expanded. And so it's really difficult getting on the outfit, and I'm always afraid I'm going to rip it because it's so fragile. So I would like to make, as I was telling you earlier, like a Madame Tussauds wax museum thing of me and put it in front of the dressing table and put it in a museum somewhere and never do it again.
But having it be you so powerful, a mannequin wouldn't have the same effect.
That's true, but I'm not going to be here forever, and a mannequin would.
That's a point.
Collaboration was such an important part of the pedagogy during that time, and you all worked together in different projects. How did that experience impact your own individual practice going forward from the program?
Oh, I'd like to comment on that because that whole first class did a ton of collaborating. We did all these costume images, and Dory photographed them, and all of us worked on them. And then Woman House was a huge collaborative project. Also, during the time of Woman House, I had 2 jobs. I worked as a fry cook on Saturday and Sunday, and 3 nights in the library. These were all school jobs at CalArts. And then 5 days a week at Woman House from all day long. And I barely made enough money just to pay rent. And I remember feeling so exhausted by the time we finally finished. And I was also in the performance workshop, part of Woman House, and then the performances during the month of February of 1972. And so after that, all I wanted to do was do work that was totally mine, that had nothing to do with anyone else's idea. I had this garage studio I made into a studio space, and I think all that just pushed me into the work that I started doing and the work I'm doing today. It's still related to the work back then. Does that make sense to you? And that's how it's been.
You got pushed so far on one end that you went to the other.
Yes, yes.
It was just the opposite for me. I always did work just with myself, and even in the feminist program in Fresno, I did that environment and stuff, and I wasn't really collaborating except that one time you dressed me up as a hooker. But other than that, I just always did my own work, and so I was really anxious to do something collaborative, and that's why I picked Nancy, and I thought we could do the room together. And when Woman House was over, everybody was going, oh, I can't wait to get back in my studio and do my own work. And I felt kind of empty and sad. I thought, oh, okay, I'll do that too. And then I got there and it was just like, oh, I missed the energy and the group spirit and how we helped each other out. And I missed it.
Well, after CalArts, and after that I was working at Braille Institute. I was teaching art to blind adults, newly blind and some totally blind adults. And the person sitting across from me, the other teacher who taught art history, we just started talking about art, and we decided to do a collaboration. We did a one-day piece in a public place, which we had to clean up afterwards, so we said no more one-day things. So I think for 8 years we collaborated. We did our own individual work, but then we did installations in different places. We'd apply for different things, parks and stuff, and it was really nice working with another person where you could talk about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that's the nice thing about collaboration, is not just having your own head, having ideas.
You know, I had a thought that it's different from the subject, but I remember when in that first class in Fresno, when Judith showed up in our studio, I was so impressed with you. I thought you were just the coolest person ever, because she came in, she was so confident. I was not used to seeing women, especially, except for Judy, with that sort of confidence, and you came in with that crew. And there was one point when we were driving somewhere. You were driving the car, and I was riding, and I was giving you directions, and you had absolutely no hesitation. You would just start going, and I'd say, well, turn right here or there. And I was so impressed with that. Because
Thank you.
Yes, and I wanted to say that just to acknowledge that was all part of that first year.
And I would say it was also just part of the time. I remember I was so swept up in those ideas and feelings, and that was a period of time when you bought gasoline at the gas station. The guy would come and pump it for you because you were a woman. And I remember getting out of my car and grabbing it from him. And how dare you take away my opportunity to make muscles? And I'm going to pump my own gas.
Plus, it was.
Now they have these, now everybody has to pump their own gas. And
Yes.
wouldn't I like someone to do that? But,
Yes, and what was it? 50 cents a gallon?
Yeah. Yes.
Or 25 cents a gallon.
But I think that movement, and I think you guys and Judy, very responsible for a lot of the expansion of it, really did shape and change things, I have to say. When it's in my film, when Judy says that moment, well, our vision is to create a society, into which we'll slowly integrate men into human relating. I mean, she really believed, people really believed that at that time. They were going to remake not only with feminism, but also regarding civil rights and all the other things that were happening at that time.
I think this is a good time to open it up to the audience for anyone that has any questions. I'm not sure how we're gonna do this.
Thank you. This was so wonderful. I just wanted to, exactly what you were talking about right now, Judith, this moment in the film where Judy's kind of talking about this larger vision. I actually didn't know that. I thought she really wanted this to always be a closed women program. And something I'm quite curious about is, you know, she has this larger vision I'm now learning, and, you know, you all very much felt like you were in a like intense relationship with this person, even as she's like moving across different places. But the reality is that Judy kind of kept leaving, right? So, you know, Fresno, the program takes place only for a year, and then she goes to CalArts and she leaves again. And even the feminist studio workshop in the women's building, she doesn't necessarily stay in all these places for very long. You know, how did you guys feel about this? And also, how did you, you know, did you sort of stay together as a group absent of her in different, you know, I'm just curious about what it was like without her. Thank you.
Well, just quickly, for me, I knew that Judy, she has always been a very driven person, and she wasn't really comfortable in an institution. She wanted to be on her own in her own studio. It didn't bother me at all. I went from CalArts to UCLA, where I got an MFA, and it was on Judy's recommendation, because that's where she had gotten her secondary degree. But I just think Judy does that. That's just her. She's not going to stick.
I'd like to say something about that, because I was in the Feminist Art Program at CalArts in '73. So many of the things that Nancy and the women here from the Fresno program talk about is also my experience. Because I was for 6 months in the Feminist Art Program at CalArts, and then Judy said, like Judy said to you, go to Fresno and follow me to CalArts. She said to me and Laurel Click, come with me to the women's building. And something that Judy often said about herself was, I get things going. And she said, and Sheila DeGretville, graphic designer who was head of the feminist graphic design department, and then one of the founders of the women's building, she said, I don't know what she said about Arlene Raven, the art historian. She said, I get things going, and Sheila finishes the women off. But the thing that you know, Judy had, in terms of just, you know, you said that she performs through the camera. That's how Judy was off camera.
Yes.
Yeah. So don't. I mean, she's certainly performative, but.
She had an impact that it didn't make a difference if she left. And the women's building lasted for 20 years without her. And she was really only active the first year. So I think that I just don't want her to be dismissed that, she's only there and she left. She left a big footprint. I mean, there's a lot of things one could criticize about Judy, but she left a big footprint. She opened us up to things that we never thought we would imagine doing, saying, being out in the public. I don't want to keep going on, but it's just very exciting. I mean, I've known Nancy and Dory for years, but it's very exciting for me to watch the panel and to see the film because it just so resonates with my own experience, and I think a lot of other women who were part of this. Anyway.
I just want to say thank you for being here. This is such a delightful afternoon with all the craziness going on in the world. But last week, I was in New York City, and some of my feminist friends said, oh, too bad you're leaving town and going to LA because Judy's Chicago show opens on the 14th, which is today, at the new museum. And I thought, this is such a bummer. I'm missing this opening and this cultural thing that's happening in New York. And then here I am experiencing this really incredible, intimate, historical, really special time with you on this same day. So I guess Judy's here and there in spirit, but just we're all together, and I just really appreciate it.
Thank
Oh,
you.
by the way, if you go to the new museum, there's a dialogue with Judy and the curator from Italy. I can't remember his name. Someone here knows it.
Massimiliano Gianni.
Yeah. So they have a link there that you can see the interview with Judy, and it's so Judy. I mean,
It always is.
so just her voice and everything.
She has a T-shirt that says, "It's a Judy thing."
So you can
So
get that.
perfect.
Hi, I want to follow up, also second the thank yous. This is an incredible day, the whole day, and it's really amazing to hear your stories and your memories. I'm a teacher also. I teach and make feminist art myself, and I have some curiosity and some envy, like watching again the Cock and Cunt play and thinking I would be fired in a second if I had my students do that today. So I have a few questions, but I hope that maybe they all relate. One is a lot of the work at the Feminist Art Program seemed to be pretty heteronormative, and I'm wondering like what kinds of, were there conversations about queerness and queer identity? Likewise, was there also conversations about inclusion and diversity and talking about who wasn't in the room? And then related to that, I would like to ask you about your media consumption. So today, my students are all over kind of TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram, and they're very forthcoming about their sexuality, about their gender identity, about their mental health. And there's lots of conversations about it because of that. I'm curious what media you were consuming at that time and how did it affect you?
That time?
No.
Media, I didn't even have a
songs,
landline.
But music.
I didn't have a TV.
So
No TV.
I also grew up, same. I grew up in Northern California with no TV, but you mentioned that everyone was smoking. And I think about the tobacco ads for women smoking and that being an empowering thing. So I'm curious, like magazines or even songs, was there any media that was affecting you in your work?
I don't remember that so much. My mother smoked, so I smoked, I think. But when you talked about, was there any talk about queerness? Often there's a criticism about that first class of Judy's and Woman House. It said that people say it was all white women. Well, that's most likely. I mean, that's actually, I guess it's true. Although I never completely identified as white because my mother was Armenian and her parents had been immigrants and all that. But I don't know, for some reason, the demographic at Fresno State at that time, that's what it was. There was not really much talk about gender identity. I mean, I don't remember
I can
that,
speak
but
to
so much.
the thing about queer talk and so forth. My understanding is that what split up, one of the forces that split second wave feminism was this fear. T. Grace Atkinson was a radical lesbian feminist.
Yes.
And there was a large group in second wave feminism. I don't know that much about it, but that fear, that discomfort, that ambiguity, and so forth was a big dividing line that split second wave feminism. And so I don't think there was much talk at all about that. And
Especially in the early 70s, everybody was in the closet. But so at Fresno State, I wasn't even aware of it, but at the feminist program at CalArts, we had 2 lesbian women, and we did a gay-straight dialogue, and it was on TV, and my employer saw it and fired me. So,
That's right.
yeah. So we were inclusive in that respect, but we were still a bunch of white women.
Although Chris Rush is Brazilian or half.
Yeah, Brazilian.
So it's people who signed up for it. You can't say,
Oh, come
It's
on.
not like anyone was excluded. It
Yeah,
was,
But the other thing I want to say about that is, you know, the 60s, right? You just have the civil rights movement, and then you had the Black Power movement, which was, so if you were a young, intelligent person at that time in the 60s and the late 60s and so forth, that was the movement that you were most engaged with. You were not as engaged with second wave feminism, although I know that there were some black women engaged with it, important black women. But but the other thing too, I mean, and you might, some people here might know more about this, but my impression living in the 60s, living at that time, was that the society was extremely segregated. Even though we were in California or Southern California and so forth, so the colleges were not that diverse.
yes.
I'm sure that Judy didn't exclude anybody, but you know, if you were an aware, awake black young woman, you'd probably be in the Black Power movement or something. That's my thought, anyway.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yes, oh,
I just want to echo everybody's gratitude to you all. It was wonderful and loved the film. First time I've ever seen it, so it was really great. So I spent the day yesterday at UC Irvine at a Women's Health Summit, and it was focused on abortion rights, so it was interesting. I think it was Nancy who talked about abortion was illegal, and it is again in many states. And I was really struck by the humor in the film. You know, the cock cunt play was just amazing, funny, but also really uncomfortable, and humor is often used to deal with discomfort. And I'm just wondering about your thoughts about today. Like, I feel like in a way, that play is still radical. If, like, you couldn't put it on your class. I taught at UNC Chapel Hill for 27 years. There's no way we could have done that play on that campus ever. And in fact, I left that job. I can't, that's another whole story. But it's a crazy time, and I don't know if we're better. I mean, I'm just wondering how you feel now about what you did then, and now here we are in 2023, and in a way it would be just as radical in a different way. I think there's lots of things that are different. I'll stop.
I think it's great. I think it's absolutely great that things that we did back then could still have some resonance today. Well, like that piece that Dory and I worked on, that breast development piece, it's now owned by the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. It was,
I tried everything.
I tried everything, it's called. It was Suzanne Lacey, Dory, me, and Jan Lester. We were all in that first year with Judy, and I remember Suzanne got us together, I think originally, and said, let's do a piece about the body. And so we looked in the backs of magazines, and that's when you could send away for stuff. And I don't think anyone else wanted to be the person to use the products and be documented, so I said, I'll do it. And then Dory photographed me every day for 2 weeks. And it sat in a banker's box, though, for 40 years. First, we showed it at CalArts in the library, and it sat, and then it got put away in a banker's box, and I had it in my storage for over 40 years. And then Laura Meyer, who was an art historian at Fresno State, decided to have a show called A Studio of Their Own, and it was about the work we did that first year in Fresno. And it was at Fresno State. And she heard about that piece, and I gave her the banker's box, and she had the photos rescanned and nicely mounted. And then Suzanne came for the reception and decided, you know, that she wanted to, well, it took like 9 or 10 years, but she showed it, and Suzanne showed it in her retrospective at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. And then someone from MoMA was there and decided to purchase it. And the amazing thing is that some friends of mine in New York City called me to tell me it was on display and that people were looking at it and laughing and, you know, reading all the information. And I just feel stunned that something we did so long ago would have that response today. So anyway, I think think it's great.
And actually, that's something that Suzanne mentions quite a bit, that humor was used a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it wasn't just
It was satirical.
angry feminists. Like, there was a lot of humor in the performances, and you used humor a lot in the workshops
Yeah,
that you
because here I
did.
was, this very flat-chested, thin woman with messy hair, trying all these bust products. Oh, and I know Susan Mogul did all kinds of stuff. Well, anyway, that's another subject. But yes, it's
Also, the thing I remember about it is at one point there was a hormone cream that you were white, and you thought it would cause hair to grow in your chest.
yeah. I was terrified to use it.
So I said, well, don't use it, and Suzanne said, oh, you've got to use it. And I said,
I used it.
It's not.
I did use it.
Oh, it's not science, it's art. It doesn't have to be.
But I believe I actually used it, though,
Maybe
because
you used it, but you didn't.
I washed it off. Yeah. Because in the photo, you can see this shiny stuff on my chest. It was called Living Fluids in this weird pink bottle. Came in the mail. We sent away for all that.
The interesting thing, you mentioned the Cock Cunt play. It was performed in Balin at Woman House 2022, but it was performed by two men. And that made it outrageously funny to see these two men performing that. And the man that played the cunt was just great. And he was on his back and like, when he was it was hysterical.
Yeah, his name is Jera Cordova, and he was a 2-term mayor of that city, Berlin. It was wonderful.
And they did it with big phalluses and
the
cunts.
props.
I mean, there was a big cunt in front, and then the other guy had a
cock was
big
about
cock.
that long.
And what Judy really loved is that when they first made the cock, the guy said it wasn't big enough, and the balls weren't big enough, and so there was this huge phallus. It was hysterical.
Yes.
I think we have time for one more question. Or maybe we'll just leave it with the giant cock and balls.
Who could top
I
that?
know you all want to see that picture.
I want to thank you all so, so much.